Truth becomes dangerous the moment different communities claim it with equal conviction, yet incompatible certainty. Welcome to another story in the series From Wonder to Power, The Journey of Thought. Today I want to explore Averroes and how philosophy, carried across cultures and languages, confronts the tension between reason and revelation in a world shaped by both. The setting has shifted from monasteries and confessional interiors to vibrant cities of the Islamic West. Libraries expand, commentaries multiply. Aristotle returns not as memory, but as living argument. Yet this revival unfolds within a civilization already ordered by divine law and prophetic authority. The question sharpens in this environment, you see. If truth is one, how can it appear divided between philosophy and faith? Averroes enters as interpreter rather than innovator, yet his role proves decisive. By restoring Aristotle's voice with precision and conviction, he challenges both theologians and philosophers to reconsider their assumptions. Knowledge becomes contested terrain. Order must now accommodate plural methods of understanding. Wonder returns, not as private introspection, but as public debate over the limits of reason. This episode begins where intellectual traditions intersect and strain against one another. Philosophy no longer speaks from a single cultural center. It travels, translates, and transforms. Here, the journey from wonder to power takes on a new dimension. Truth becomes a matter not only of insight, but of authority. Across the warm courtyards of Córdoba, Ibn Rushd moves carefully among stacks of manuscripts. Texts arrive from different centuries and languages, each carrying layers of gloss, correction, and pious adjustment. Aristotle's voice is present, but buried. Ibn Rushd's task is not to honor it with reverence, it is to recover it with precision, you see. He treats philosophy like a physician treats a patient. Diagnosis comes before admiration. Arguments must be stripped to their structure. Demonstration must be separated from persuasion. Where others seek harmony too quickly, he insists on distinction. Aristotle, he believes, must first be understood on his own terms. Only then can any reconciliation with faith be meaningful. This method reshapes intellectual life around him. Aristotle becomes not a source of isolated wisdom, but a system of causes and proofs. Nature appears intelligible through reason. Motion follows necessity. Knowledge grows through demonstration rather than illumination. Ibn Rushd refuses to soften these claims to preserve theological comfort. Truth, in his view, does not need protection through ambiguity. His commentaries address different levels of understanding. Short summaries guide beginners. Middle works train students in logical method. Long commentaries confront the most difficult questions without concession. Through this layered effort, Aristotle returns as a rational instrument rather than a cultural threat. Philosophy regains autonomy without declaring hostility toward belief. Seen from above, the historical consequence becomes clear. Averroes transmits Aristotle to medieval Europe precisely because he refuses to domesticate him. By insisting on clarity, he creates space for disagreement without intellectual collapse. His writings teach readers how to distinguish levels of explanation and how to allow reason its own voice. As Ibn Rushd closes another manuscript, the work remains unfinished, and it always will be. Yet something essential has been restored. Aristotle is no longer hidden behind fear or reverence. He stands again as a thinker who demands engagement rather than obedience. Within the quiet of his study, where legal texts rest beside philosophical treatises, Ibn Rushd weighs two kinds of obligation. One shapes him as a believer, formed by revelation and law. The other shapes him as a thinker, guided by demonstration and proof. Confusion arises when each is forced to answer questions that belong to the other. He has seen this confusion produce fear, censorship, and intellectual dishonesty. Well, he therefore insists on a careful distinction. Faith speaks to the many. It teaches through images, commands, and promises that sustain moral order. Philosophy speaks to the few, who are trained to follow argument wherever it leads. Its language is technical. Its conclusions remain open to revision. Its discipline is demanding. To treat revelation as if it were philosophy is to misunderstand its purpose. To expect philosophy to replace revelation is to misjudge its limits. This separation, in his view, does not weaken belief. It protects it. When theology adopts philosophical claims without discipline, it risks collapse under scrutiny. When philosophy is constrained by theological expectation, it abandons its own integrity. Each domain must remain faithful to its method. Truth does not fracture because paths differ. Error begins when paths are confused. The consequences are immediate. Ibn Rushd accepts that philosophical conclusions may contradict literal readings of Scripture. This does not disturb him. Scripture, he argues, calls for interpretation when reason demonstrates necessity. Allegory becomes fidelity rather than evasion. Revelation aims at guiding souls towards salvation. Philosophy aims at understanding the nature of reality. Each serves the good within its own register. Seen from above, this distinction reshapes intellectual life. By separating faith from philosophy, Averroes creates space for reason to operate without constant theological oversight. Yet he also recognizes that reason alone cannot sustain communal moral life. The result is not perfect harmony, but structured coexistence. Conflict becomes manageable because domains are defined. As Ibn Rushd returns to his duties, the separation remains intact. He prays without syllogism and reasons without invocation. The unity he seeks lies beyond procedure. Truth, he believes, does not fear clarity, even when clarity reveals difference. Pressure gathers slowly, like heat trapped beneath stone. Ibn Rushd senses it long before it becomes public. Questions once shared among scholars now carry suspicion. Arguments that once invite clarification begin to sound like threats to faith itself. What unsettles his critics is not that reason thinks, but that it refuses to stop where theology feels exposed. The conflict sharpens around explanation. Reason demands necessity. Causes produce effects. Nature follows intelligible patterns. Theology, entrusted with guarding revelation, fears what cannot be supervised. When philosophical conclusions collide with literal readings of Scripture, tension rises at once. To yield to reason appears impious. To restrain it risks falsehood. Ibn Rushd observes how the search for certainty hardens into prohibition. He rejects this forced choice. Reason, he argues, cannot contradict truth, because its method is directed toward truth. When demonstration proves something necessary, interpretation must adjust. Theology errs when it treats metaphor as physical explanation. Philosophy errs when it imagines itself sufficient for guiding communal life. The conflict arises not from opposition, but from domains overlapping without discipline. The consequences soon become concrete. Accusations follow. Manuscripts are scrutinized. Protection, once granted by reputation, begins to fade. Theologians fear that unrestricted reasoning will dissolve authority. Philosophers fear that theology will silence inquiry. The space between them contracts. What was once a distinction becomes a battleground. Seen from above, this moment forms a lasting fault line. Averroes stands where ancient rationalism meets a religious civilization unsure how much autonomy thought can bear. The conflict between reason and theology is not resolved. It becomes structural. Europe will inherit it as a permanent tension, reappearing under new institutions and languages. As Ibn Rushd withdraws from the center of influence, reason does not vanish. It changes direction. What cannot remain secure in one world travels into another. The conflict remains unfinished, yet its terms are clarified. Reason seeks understanding. Theology seeks to preserve meaning. Between them, philosophy learns the cost of thinking without permission. By the end of Averroes' struggle, truth no longer appears as a single voice speaking from one authority. It becomes a contested field where different paths claim legitimacy without easily merging. What he gains is a renewed autonomy for reason. Philosophy recovers its discipline, its method, and its courage to follow argument beyond inherited boundaries. Aristotle returns not as a relic, but as a living structure of thought. Intellectual life becomes more precise, more demanding, more exposed to disagreement. Order shifts from imposed harmony to negotiated clarity. Thought begins to accept that unity may require distinction before reconciliation, you see. What is lost is the illusion of seamless integration between faith and philosophy. The idea that one language can fully contain both revelation and demonstration weakens. Tension becomes permanent. Communities must now live with intellectual plurality rather than resolve it through authority alone. This protects enquiry, yet it also unsettles certainty. This moment marks another turning in the journey from wonder to power. Philosophy steps back into public conflict, discovering that its influence depends not only on truth, but on the structures willing to host it. Reason becomes both instrument of understanding and source of instability. In the next chapter, thought seeks a different resolution. Anselm of Canterbury will attempt to unite faith and reason, not through separation, but through a disciplined ascent from belief toward understanding. Here begins the first scholastic turn. Philosophy re-enters theology, not as rival or refugee, but as partner in the search for intelligible faith. If this series has sparked your interest and you wish to delve deeper into the topics discussed, I invite you to the source from which it originates. This book takes you on a journey from the 7 sages of antiquity through the modern revolution with Kant and Hegel to the contemporary philosophical dilemmas of the 20th and 21st centuries. In the book, You will find significantly more details than I could present in the film, as well as space for your own reflection at your own pace. It is this very book that forms the foundation of the entire series you are watching. If you wish to explore the history of philosophy in its full version, get it on Amazon. The link is in the description of this video.